Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. I've long told you that Professor Truth's practical definition of politics is that it's the distribution of power in a given setting. No matter what setting you have human beings in, there's always an uneven distribution of power. And that's what you call politics. It doesn't matter if it's family politics, bedroom politics, office politics, or electoral politics. It's always the same. But power is not static. It's not fixed. It's always in flux. It's always fluid. And that being the case, politics is how power rearranges itself. It changes form, but not its mission. And that's what brings us to the white media. You see, this is important to go over because the white media serves two purposes. The first is to spread disinformation to the masses. That one's pretty obvious. We understand that. The white media carpet bombs the public with all kinds of propaganda to derange the public mind. But the second purpose the white media serves, which is equally important, is that this is how white power communicates within itself. That's the secondary purpose of the white media. Whenever they're trying to send messages to one another, to help steer white power in a particular direction, they use their media to do that kind of internal communication and say, hey, look out for these people over here, or here's the line of attack we should be taking, or here's a tool that white power will be able to turn into a cog in its machine. And speaking of tools, that brings us to Kamala Harris. Her candidacy is being very firmly established as the heir apparent. At least they're doing a lunk-headed attempt to make it seem that way. They're talking about, she's raised a ton of money in the first 24 or so hours since she was announced as having the lead in the candidates race, that she's going to be the nominee. She's getting all this money just left, right, and center. Well, keep in mind, Donald Trump was also outspent by a number of his opponents, and that didn't stop him from beating them either. Trump has understood that he needs to get a critical mass of the money that he needs. It's not a matter of, do I have more than the other person, though that's certainly not a bad thing. The real question is, do I have enough to get the kind of support that I need where I need it? And now Kamala Harris is being talked about as who's going to be her running mate. Typically, the running mate for a presidential candidate is supposed to be someone of lesser charisma, someone who won't overshadow the nominee, but with such a dullard as Kamala Harris, her ticket's going to need all the personality it can get. And clearly a number of individuals in the white media have figured this one out. Kamala Harris is not going to be setting the world on fire. She's certainly not going to be somebody who just is so magnetic on screen, and every time this woman opens her mouth, she puts both feet into it. She's going to need somebody to take some of the heat off of her, and apparently some corners of the white media already have their short list of individuals to do the job. Not surprisingly, one of the names that's being kicked around these days is Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania. He's never held federal office, but he's a governor, and usually governors and senators are the ones who ascend to the presidency. But one thing about Josh Shapiro is he has a lot in common with another Pennsylvania politician, Senator John Fetterman. Both of them won office the same year. They're both white and Jewish, and they both promise black voters absolutely nothing. And that's why you have the Huffington Post trying to push this guy as the running mate that Trump fears most. That's a catchy little headline, and it certainly teases the idea that Trump is afraid of this guy, but actually he's not. This is what the people who wrote it want you to believe. They want you to think that Donald Trump is quaking in his boots at the idea that Josh Shapiro, who looks like a freaking librarian, is going to actually be doing what? Running against Trump? That ain't going to happen. And if it was going to happen, it would have happened before now. This is not to say that Josh Shapiro doesn't have presidential aspirations. He does, obviously. And the white media's been mentioning his name almost right up there with Gavin Newsom. But as far as Donald Trump being afraid of Josh Shapiro, who are they trying to fool? The reason the Huffington Post pitches the idea that Kamala should choose Shapiro to be her vice president is because he's the governor of Pennsylvania. It's a battleground state, and right now all the polls show that Trump is winning it handily. So if the election were held today, according to the polls at least, Donald Trump would carry Pennsylvania. Now, as I've explained all this week, part of why you choose a vice president is based on whether the presidential candidate thinks that this VP can help him pick up an important state. You see, while it's true that Barack Obama chose Joe Biden to be his running mate because he wanted someone who white males could identify with, it's also true that Biden was from Scranton, Pennsylvania, something that Biden talked about constantly. And when Obama sent him to go campaign there, that's the first words that came out of his mouth, reminding everybody, hey, I'm a hometown son here, so this state of Pennsylvania, crucial state that we need, don't forget about me. Everyone who actually observes Kamala Harris already knows she spent several years trying to recreate the Obama playbook to the presidency. So choosing a running mate from Pennsylvania is the kind of cliche, typical move that might appeal to Kamala. Now, another name that the Huffington Post was floating for the exact same reasons is Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona. Arizona is the state that put the final nail into Trump's 2020 re-election hopes. It's also the home of racist Sheriff Joe Arpaio. It's also the home of Senator Kristen Sinema, too. You'll recall that she was a Democrat until she ran afoul of basically the entire party by doing exactly nothing other than looking out for herself. So she declared herself an independent 2 years ago, and she's hoping that when she tries to run for re-election next year, not too many people will hold that against her. She's trying to realign herself in the political machine, and we'll see if it works. But the point is, Arizona is not exactly a place that's known for producing rock-ribbed Democrats. It's actually known for producing all kinds of peculiar individuals who oftentimes lean right of center. But this is what's going on, and this is what you have this corner of the white media, the Huffington Post, recommending, and they're not alone. What they're looking for are people who are going to be politically reliable to the Democrats' policy of benign neglect for the black community. Neither Shapiro nor Kelly has any sort of track record of reaching out to black voters. When Shapiro was running for the governorship, he didn't say a word about black people as far as he was concerned, out of sight, out of mind. I guess that's why he and John Fetterman get along so well. And as for Senator Mark Kelly, Arizona's weather may be hot, but his disposition toward the black voters out there has been ice cold. This is a man who has not lifted a finger to try to find a way to make inroads with the black community because all of these Democrats are pursuing a political strategy of circumventing the black vote, trying to win without having to do anything for black people. This is the actual political race they're trying to win, not against the Republicans so much as against the black vote. That's who they're actually looking to defeat, and you got the white media trying to help them do it. The Huffington Post is not some wildly influential website, but it more often than not reflects the MO of established power. These guys all operate out of the same playbook, cut and paste. Josh Shapiro is not some live wire. He's not some outrageously charismatic or interesting person. This is not a guy who's electrifying the field for Democrats, and this is just somebody who the young folks love him and voters can't get enough of him. Josh Shapiro's only known, to the extent that he is known, for one thing: he's the governor of Pennsylvania. Now, Pennsylvania is a politically important state, but Josh Shapiro, the political candidate, he's not terribly interesting or crucial at all. You could put any Democrat in his office, and you'd be seeing similar headlines. And yet, a lot of people in the left corner of the white media are very desirous to see Josh Shapiro find himself as the VP candidate or find himself as some sort of important ambassadorship, anything that gets him on the short list to the White House. Just like they're doing with Gavin Newsom, there's a lot of inside the Beltway people and white media types who would love to see Governor Shapiro actually have a shot at winning the presidency. He's already schmoozed and gotten himself in good with certain quarters, and that's the reason why they just keep bringing up his name, even though he hasn't actually done anything. Seriously, why do I keep hearing Josh Shapiro's name getting kicked around so much? This is a guy who's a governor, and I can't think of anything spectacular that he's done for Pennsylvania. If it wasn't for the white media insisting on mentioning this guy's name so much, I would have forgotten who the governor of Pennsylvania is. Somebody really wants to see this guy find a way into the higher echelons of American politics, even if they have to invent it out of whole cloth for him. But what are any of these people offering to us, the Shapiros, the Kellys, or the Kamalas? Voting is not about scaring the orange man. This isn't some internet chat room. Voting is about deciding who gets what. And Josh Shapiro and Mark Kelly have already made it known, as far as they're concerned, black people get exactly nothing. And that being the case, the Huffington Post needs to understand that when it comes time to vote, no matter how many headlines they put up, because while the left corner of the white media is trying to put forward the idea that Donald Trump is scared of who might show up to oppose him on Election Day, the ones who ought to be worried are the Democrats about whether or not black voters will even show up at all. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Morris Bodden, Shiva Boone, Charlie's Painting, Jerlene Harris, and Mark Stroud. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.